Good morning, ma'am. So, I choose the topic, the Marcos Dictatorship, for my reporting. First, let's get to know Ferdinand Marcos. His full name was Ferdinand Edralin Marcos, was born on September 11, 1917 in Sarat, a fourth-class municipality in the province of Ilocos Norte, Philippines. He was a politician and lawyer who was the 10th President of the Philippines from 1966 to 1986. Widely considered by academics, economists, and journalists as a kleptocrat. He attended school in Manila and studied law in the late 1930s at the University of the Philippines. On May 1, 1954, Ferdinand Marcos married beauty queen Imelda Romualdez. The Marcos Dictatorship. President Ferdinand E. Marcos assumed power on December 30, 1965 and became the second president re-elected to the office in 1969. There were efforts to maneuver the 1971 Constitutional Convention to permit his continuing office. With the swell of student radicalization and increasing number of violent demonstrations, Marcos played up middle-class fears and used this to justify the imposition of martial law on September 23, 1972 by virtue of Proclamation number 1081. Martial law was not just an invocation of the President's emergency powers under the 1935 Constitution. Marcos went further to assume all governing powers, excluded civilian courts, and systematically replaced the 1935 Constitution with the 1973 Constitution for his own needs. The replacement of the Constitution. The replacement of the Constitution was done dubious circumstances. First, he ordered a viva voce in which the voting age was reduced to 15 to ratify the new Constitution. Second, he intimidated the Supreme Court to approve it. So first, Marcos ordered a viva voce plebiscite on January 10 to 15, 1973, in which the voting age was reduced to 15 to ratify the new Constitution. Military men were placed prominently to indicate voters. Reports indicated that mayors and governors were given the quotas for yes votes on the Constitution and negative votes were often not recorded. Results report that 90% of the citizens have voted for the Constitution, even though some communities did not participate in the Citizens' Assembly. Over the next few years, Marcos would hold 4 more plebiscites in 1973, 1975, 1976, and 1978 through citizen assemblies to legitimize the continuation of martial rule. Second, he intimidated the Supreme Court to approve it. Using the stick and carrot method on the justices of the Supreme Court, President Marcos was able to force the Supreme Court to uphold martial law and the new Constitution. Previously, around 8,000 individuals including senators, civil libertarians, journalists, students, and labor leaders were arrested and detained without due process upon the declaration of martial law. With many of them filing petitions to the Supreme Court for habeas corpus, they challenged the constitutionality of the proclamation. However, the Supreme Court issued its final decision in Javellana v. Executive Secretary, which essentially validated the Constitution. This would be the final legitimizing decision on the constitutionality of martial law in GR number L-35546, September 17, 1974. The Supreme Court dismissed petitions for habeas corpus by ruling the martial law was a political question beyond the jurisdiction of the court, and that Furthermore, the court has already deemed the 1973 Constitution in full force and effect, replacing the 1935 Constitution. After the landmark decision, Chief Justice Roberto V. Concepcion went into early retirement, 50 days before his originally scheduled retirement. In silent protest over the majority in the Javillana v. Executive Secretary case, he argued against the validity of the new constitution and its questionable aspects, together with Justices Claudio Tejanqui, Calixto Zaldivar, and Enrique Fernando. Martial law imposed government control over all forms of media. On September 22, 1972, Marcos issued Letter of Instruction No. 1 ordering the Press Secretary and the Defense Secretary to assure control over all media outlets. All periodicals were padlocked, and media personalities who had criticized Marcos, his family, or his administration were taken to Camp Crame without any charges being filed. Among them were publishers Joaquin Chino P. Roses, Manila Times, and Eugenio Lopez Jr., Manila Chronicle, and columnists Max Sullivan and Luis D. Beltran. Marcos issued at least 11 presidential decrees that suppressed press freedom. Journalists who did not comply with the new restriction faced physical threats, libel suits, or forced resignation. With such stringent censorship regulations, most of the periodicals that were allowed to operate were crony newspapers such as Benjamin Romualdez Times Journal, Hans Menzies Bulletin Today, and Roberto Benedicto's Philippine Daily Express. These newspapers offered bootlicking reportage on the country's economy while completely eschewing political issues. Hence, President Marcos' absolute rule had a cloak of legality and inconsistibility, making it nearly impregnable. However, specific factors converged and eventually led to the fall of the dictatorship and the eventual restoration of the democracy in the Philippines. So, as we can see, Marcos ruled the Philippines for 20 years, from 1966 to 1986, established an authoritarian regime in the Philippines that came under criticism for corruption and for its suppression of democratic processes. After his regime was toppled by a popular uprising in 1896, Marcos died in exile in Honolulu, Hawaii on September 28, 1989.